الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. هيا على السلام. هيا على السلام. هيا على الفلاح. هيا على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
وعلى آله وصحبه
محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد محمد نبينا بنور حبينا من مكة حبيبي نور سطع المدينة من صلى صلاته يدخل الشفاة يا بدل افدل وما سفال في مماته صلي على محمد السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا حبيبي يا نبي الله السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا حبيبي يا نبي الله يا رسول الله صلي على النبي وتبسم ده النبي تبسم وتبسم ده النبي تبسم اللهم صلي عليه قلب المتين يبكل ما صلى عليك وسلم ذاك السعادة مكرما يا سيدي يا قمر سيدنا النبي قمرون وجميل وجميل سيدنا النبي وجميل وكف المصطفى كالورد نادي الله الله وإثرها يبكى إذا مست آيادي الله الله وكف المصطفى كالورد نادي الله الله وإثرها يبكى إذا مست آيادي الله الله وعم نبالوها كل العباد وعم نبالوها كل العباد وعم نبالوها كل العباد حبيب الله يا خير البراء يا قمرون قمرون سيدنا النبي قمرون وجميل والسلام الصلاة والسلام الصلاة والسلام الصلاة والسلام صلاة الله سلام الله على طه رسول الله صلاة الله سلام الله على ياسين حبيب الله صلاة الله سلام الله على ياسين حبيب الله ووصلنا ببسم الله وبالهادي رسول الله وكل مجاهد لله بأهل البدر يا الله وكل مجاهد لله بأهل البدر يا الله صلاة الله سلام الله على طه رسول الله صلاة الله سلام الله على ياسين حبيب الله صلاة الله سلام الله على ياسين حبيب الله إلهي سلم الأمة من الآفات والنقمة ومن
Yes, you hear me?
I hear you, Your Excellency.
I see you and I hear you.
Alhamdulillah.
Good rehearsal. Now I'm happy. And how you see me?
Perfect.
Good.
You're in your library, Your Excellency.
Yes, I'm beautiful view. But listen, I need some good pictures from you. My friend,
Now, okay.
I need some good pictures from you.
Sure,
Not
Your
now,
Excellency.
not now while I'm talking.
Okay, Your Excellency. We will, inshallah, we will.
Take them from the screen and send them to me later.
Inshallah. We will do it, inshallah, Your Excellency.
Okay, thank you. So everything is okay, perfect. Within how many minutes still? 7 minutes.
7 minutes, inshallah, will kickstart, Your Excellency.
Very good, very good.
So I'm putting the music back on.
Okay, please go ahead.
ياسين حبيب الله صلاة الله سلام الله على ياسين حبيب الله الصلاة والسلام الصلاة والسلام الصلاة والسلام الصلاة والسلام الصلاة والسلام Ya Nizamuddin Auliya, Ya Nizamuddin Sultan. कदम बढ़ाने हदों को मिटा ले, आजा खालीपन में पीका घर तेरा, तेरे बिन खाली आजा कालीपन में, तेरे बिन खाली आजा कालीपन में। रंग रेसा, रंग रेसा, रंग रेसा, ओ रंग रेसा, समय मोला वही वही माया, रेसा रंग तेरा तन मेरा मन, ले ले रंगाए चाहे तन चाहे मन, रंग रेसा रंग तेरा तन मेरा मन, ले ले रंगाए चाहे तन चाहे मन। सजरा सवेरा मेरा तन भर से, सजरा अंधेरा तेरी जलती लू, सजरा सवेरा मेरा तन भर से, सजरा अंधेरा तेरी जलती लू, खतरा मिलन तेरे सरबर से। ओ मौला मौला, कुन फाया कुन, 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 फाया कुन, फाया कुन, फाया कुन, फाया कुन, फाया कुन, कुन फाया कुन, फाया कुन, सदकल्लाह, फाया कुन, फाया कुन, कुन फाया कुन, कुन फाया कुन, फाया कुन, फाया कुन, फाया कुन, फाया कुन, सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम।
MashaAllah.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. The Masum Choral Ensemble produced this only for us, and I believe it's the time for us to include all the participants. I wonder, they're all in the meeting room. So it means that the floor is for our MC, dear Iman. Please, the floor is yours.
Who is going to speak?
Iman will be taking over right now. What? There, Iman? I think she has a problem with her mic. It seems
انقطع على المايك يا إيمان.
She's our MC, so
Press your mic.
that is why she cannot talk right now. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maybe until our wonderful MC, amazing Qatari youth representative, and I can see her. She's actually now joining. There, Iman, are you with us? I think still
there's the problem of there's the problem with virtual.
That's actually one of the virtual problems that we are having.
Iman.
هلا يبا حمد. How are you?
هلا بنتي. هلا على فكرة بنتي اسمها إيمان. أنا عندي بنت واحدة واسمها إيمان. My daughter is Iman, so I love this name. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's start our event for today. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen across the globe. Before we start the ceremony, I have a question to ask. What are the main issues that facing the youth when trying to accomplish their goals? Some of you would say lack of guidance, and the others would say lack of resource. There are also other reasons. Today at AHD event, we will introduce the solution for the youth in achieving their goals. My name is Iman Al-Ubaidi, and I am your host and master for AHD ceremony. Our role in AHD for post-COVID humanity is to provide resources, opportunities to the youth who have the potential to work on a change globally. We must acknowledge that today's youth are tomorrow's leaders, presidents, CEOs, policymakers, and individuals in key positions. The youth will act as an influencer in our society that will shape our humanity. So in order to raise fair, inclusive, and kind future leaders who will make decisions that will affect us, we need to invest in their learning beyond the classroom. Hopefully, with more programs like SDG, Post-COVID Humanity, or DPCH for short, the youth will find the support to bring any possible ideas into a fair, more inclusive, and sustainable post-COVID humanity design. Through dedication, motivation, and willpower, anyone with an idea can make social change for a better future. In DPCH, teams develop ideas, designs to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, in response to COVID-19 pandemic. With that in mind, we called for change makers to join the DPCH programs that aims to unleash their transformative power to design more equal, inclusive, and sustainable post-COVID humanity. And we are excited to start our program for today and tomorrow. Now that being said, please allow me to introduce our first speaker for the day, Dr. Imad-Din Shaheen, the Dean of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University. Dr. Imad, the mic is yours right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Iman. Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello?
We can hear you, Professor.
Okay, very good, because it says, the host is not allowing you to be unmuted. Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good afternoon, everyone. His Excellency Minister Hamid Al-Kawari, His Excellency Professor and dear colleague Mustafa Al-Amin, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Imad Al-Din Shaheen, and I am the Dean of the College of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University. It's my honor and privilege to welcome you all to this exciting and exceptional event, AHD, which translates to commitment or pledge. AHD is part of the Design Post-COVID Humanity, or DPCH program, an innovative and forward-looking educational space that has taken full advantage of the virtual COVID environment. It has brought together students and young professionals from all over the world through a series of programs, empowering the youth to design a more inclusive and sustainable post-COVID humanity. And together, the organizers, participants, and supporters of this program have curated solutions to problems many have not even begun to consider, exemplifying the importance of ta'aruf, acquaintance, ta'awun, cooperation, and tarahum, mercifulness. The AHD 2-day event holds strong to the commitment to design a better world for all, inviting a selective set of youth to create feasible and ambitious avenues towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, bringing together a host of incredible speakers. We invite all participants to think from this abundant, to drink from, we invite all participants to drink from this abundant well of knowledge and become inspired to affect positive change on a global scale. At the College of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University, we pride ourselves in teaching the youth, our future leaders and change makers, lessons that transcend the walls of any classroom. Our university shapes the whole self, imbuing them with lessons about faith, ethics, design thinking, moral behavior that are also often missed in a conventional educational environment. We have created the Design Post-COVID Humanity program as the embodiment of these values, presenting to the world our collective understanding and implementation of experiential learning and innovation. DPCH, AHD, and related programs rely on human-centered design thinking as a unique approach to problem solving, equipping the youth with the necessary tools they need to make morally sound contributions in today's high globalized world. Exceptional efforts are being made across the globe to leverage the ambitions and determination of the youth, giving them the space and resources they need to positively mold their future, and we are proud to be part of that. It's our collective responsibility to ensure the youth are prepared to build a healthier humanity. We here at the College of Islamic Studies are extremely honored to be playing a crucial role in that future and look forward to seeing the fruits of your hard labor. Thank you and welcome to AHD for designing post-COVID humanity.
Thanks, Dr. Imad. Before we start our main event for today, we would like to thank our host organizer, Dr. Evren Tok, and the professor at the College of Islamic Studies in Hamad bin Khalifa University, and also the lead designer, Mr. Goksel Gossel.
Thank you so much, dear Iman and dear Professor Ahmad. In fact, there's not much to say. I was trying to prepare like what to say, what to convey today, and then I felt that I should do it very spontaneously. But I would like to draw your attention to one really important element of this really international event, which is very innovative, very creative, and I believe very well designed. That element is the fact that one of the most important architects of this event has been a high school student there, Iman El-Obeidi. She has not only received a lot of glamour and also recognition in Qatar through different organizations, competitions, but also she has shown her ability to collectivize and mobilize our resources at a global level. So I believe that the youth is the real architect of this event. This is the element that makes me really proud. And I would like to thank Professor Ahmad Shaheen, Dean of College of Islamic Studies, and our leaders by giving us the opportunity to organize such events. And hopefully we will be doing more and more with the support of the youth. Thank you.
Special thanks for our organizer, Dr. Evren Talk, and Margos, the mic is yours right now.
Thank you so much, dear Iman. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Design Post-COVID Humanity Program. And my name is Göksel, and I am the founder and design leader of location-independent learning experience design studio SOGLab, which designs learning experiences to localize the global goals UN SDG 2030 agenda. It has been 2 years since the global epidemic started. During this time, we designed 2 programs, Design Post-COVID Normal and Design Post-COVID Humanity, that attracted the attention of even the General Secretary of the United Nations. And we implemented these programs with young people, which Dr. Tok mentioned it, and hosted by valuable Hamad bin Khalifa University. And we are happy to be part of this program as always. For the last 10 years, we have been trying to find answers to the big questions that have been asked since the beginning of the human history at SOGLab. What is our purpose here in the planet Earth? To find the simplest possible answer to this question, we examine all cultures, religions, and communities and philosophies. And the good news for today is that we have finally reached a point where we can create a vision of the future of humanity. We had to go to Baghdad in the 9th and 10th century to find the first words of the vision we were looking for. We came across an academy there, just like today's Qatar National Library. Beitul Hikmah, it means the house of wisdom. And Arabic and Islamic culture call it this vision is hikmah. And then we came across to the same track in Andalusia in Spain. With the intense translation movement in Andalusia in Spain, the knowledge of humanity of wisdom advanced into Europe. Then with the presence of this wisdom, the Italian Renaissance began. The heliocentric solar system theory was first discovered by Kepler with this knowledge of wisdom. Eventually, this knowledge of wisdom, together with Isaac Newton, attained the mathematics that constitutes all modern technology that affects our day. This new century ahead awaits a whole new kind of human being from us. We at SOGLab call this person the philosopher designer. It turns out that in order to advance humanity, we need to learn the observed nature like a philosopher, to discover the minds of all thinkers in history, to read a lot, and to criticize ideas and models that do not take us forward. But the job doesn't stop there. On the other hand, to put this discovery, philosophical knowledge into practice, we need to act like a designer, like a Leonardo da Vinci, and use digital tools for social benefit. The art event that you are part of today helped us convey a revolutionary message through you. We design in normal because the new humanity will freely design the results of own life. It will involve others in design process. Eventually, as we all expect, peaceful and sustainable societies will be built on universal knowledge of wisdom. And I hope you start this day with this intention and excitement today. Welcome all of you again, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Mr. Goxel. And now we start you off with our first keynote speaker for today's event. Dr. Hamad bin Abdulaziz Al-Kawari is a state master with the rank of Deputy Prime Minister. He is a Qatari diplomat who held key official positions in key international organizations such as the United Nations and UNESCO. Dr. Hamad, the mic is yours right now.
Thank you very much. I'm more than happy to be given this opportunity for the third time. And I'm pleased to be with my brother, Professor Ahmad Shaheen, and with you all, especially with the youth. And today, I will talk to you about my experience. And I hope that it's going to be inspiring for the youth. Because the youth is the future. I started as ambassador very young, maybe in your age or younger than your age. I was 22. Qatar just got the independence. They need young people to be ambassadors, and I was one of them. But I tell you honestly, I didn't feel happy because it was a big challenge and I'm not prepared for this expectation to meet the expectations. And that could be destructive to start a big job that you feel that you are not going to meet its requirements. But it was big incentive for me to look what I can do to be up to this job. And the outcome that I came to is to have continuous knowledge. It's not enough to be graduated from one of the universities. But the education, the continuous knowledge is the only way that you will meet the requirements and you will do the job that your country trusted on you. So between 1974 and 79, I was ambassador in Damascus. And I realized that my experience has to go in a parallel way with my knowledge. And I rushed to join for the master degree the St. Joseph University in Lebanon. And within 2 years, I got the master degree. And it's good that I prepared myself for a bigger job, but bigger job, bigger responsibility. And you can imagine the challenge that I am facing in a very early age. From Damascus, I had to go to Paris as ambassador to Paris. Different culture, because I was in Cairo, I was in Beirut, Damascus, but not in Europe. It is a great opportunity, but as big the opportunity is big the challenge. So believe me, I decided from the first day to learn the French. And I tell you a very interesting anecdote. I was told at the airport that within 40 days, I have to present my credentials to President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. And I said, why I don't learn a few words in French to manage the meeting with the president in French. It was just a kind of exercise, but I was sure that I cannot make it. So when the chief of protocol asked me, what language you want to speak? I said, Arabic. He said, okay, the president is going to speak French. You are going to speak Arabic. So the problem solved. But while I was waiting for the president in a small room, the chief protocol came and he said to me, I'm in trouble. The interpreter did not come. So I said, I will manage. He said, how you are going to manage? The president doesn't want anybody to speak either French or your national language. I said, I will manage. Then I was in the room repeating the few words that I learned and leaving the president talk most of the time. And he was very happy that the ambassador of Qatar speaks French. But my ambition did not stop here. I wanted to continue my studies, so I studied the French. I finished the language. I wanted to go to the Sorbonne. I went to the Sorbonne. I studied in Sorbonne 2 years, but I couldn't finish the language, my doctorate, because I had to move to New York. So when I went to New York in itself, it's a very important city for the knowledge and for the education. And you can learn from the practice, because there, the United Nations itself is a big school. And the committees of the United Nations, the 6 committees, it covers the international problem from all its aspects. But my ambition did not stop here. I want to finish the doctorate. So I went to New York University and I got my PhD. And my PhD, it was about the decision-making process in the Security Council, Iran-Iraq War as a case study. My dear sons and girls, when we look to the future, we realize how much work awaits us as young. Just as we realize we must continue to empower ourselves across wide-ranging areas to enhance our competencies. The responsibility of us as a young is huge. For each generation, our generation is different than yours. Every generation has a greater power than the one that preceded it. The young face many challenges that require aspiration and perseverance. Determination is the pillar of this quest, and awareness of that society requires good examples and knowledge in order to raise efficiency. There is an ancient Arabic saying, knowledge is like a bow, and the skill is like arrows. The dreams of youth are born during their studies, after which they must learn how to expand their knowledge and acquire skills based on the current demand. In addition, their aspirations are returned by the community, which teach them the basic of citizenship and the social responsibility. Innovation, as you mentioned, and the first speakers talk about it, is necessary for you, as it is the vehicle for progress. Young should find examples in the Arab Muslim scholars who contributed to human civilization through their knowledge in various fields during the Muslim civilization golden age. And I remember when Doha was the capital for the Arab culture, the opening word was Beit al-Hikmah, because we wanted Doha to be Beit al-Hikmah. And in a way, we succeeded to make Doha Beit al-Hikmah. And I think having a city like UF Qatar Foundation is proof that we are Beit Hikmah. And Hamad bin Khalifa University as an example. Let young but when I want to talk about let them find inspiration in the clock that the Abbasid Khalif Harun al-Rashid gave to Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, which was not just a tool to tell the time, but rather a symbol of an era when the Arab Islamic civilization was technically advanced. We need our youth to revisit the glorious time so that our countries, our area, our world become actively engaged in the current scientific progress. It's not plausible that our communities remain as consumers. Unfortunately, we say this because this is a fact. At a time when knowledge is available to everyone and when the young have access to resources for innovation in ways unimaginable to previous generations. There is no doubt that empowerment is necessary for you to reach your potential. Such empowerment is achieved through expanding the circle of your engagement in public life, sustainable development, and in decision-making to fulfill your inspiration and unleash your capabilities. This requires improving the quality of education to meet the needs of the employment market and to ensure their right to decent work. Empowerment aims to give you the ability to be productive in a time of consumerism. Empowered young people are actively involved in promoting development thanks to their culture, economic, social, and political skills. Societies need young people who are creative, productive, and effective. This approach means stakeholders should develop policies and the programs to stimulate their social and economic creativity and to boost their cultural level. We all know today that the human element is an important enabler for development, and that demographic power and advantage in the Arab region compared with the rest of the world, it's not a negative thing, as too many people think, and as too many leaders repeat. It is a positive factor and a driving force for progress toward the future goals. This power, however, needs basic conditions to have an impact on our lives and our future. This power has no meaning if it is not based on a sufficient realization of present and the future requirements, or if it lacks a clear vision of what society we want and what lifestyle we seek in the context of our contemporary civilization. Therefore, the youth today represent this creative force that needs to have a clear awareness and purposeful vision. This is our shared responsibility. Young people need us to guide them in the path of our experiences, and they need a supportive environment that encourages them to think and act freely and clearly. As people are the center of development, youth must be engaged on its front lines. We should all strive to empower youth by drawing upon our cultural heritage. We are heirs of the ideals that have elevated the humans to the highest status. Doesn't Allah say in the glorious Quran, and we have certainly honored the children of Adam and carried them on land and sea and provided them of the good things and preferred them over much of what we have created with definite preference? We should be guided by values that encourage our youth to aspire to the highest and to believe in their role as the human capital of the future and the target of investment. As the Arabic proverb says, investing in people is more important than investing in stones. And it is time to trust in the capabilities of our youth and their ability to bring about a sustainable future for our societies. If you ask me about the biggest achievement for Qatar, I'm not going to say the high building or the infrastructure, but the education and the healthcare. Because this is what we have to focus on. Every society seeking to achieve progress is looking for new tools to engage in youth in all aspects of social, economic, and political life. Even countries experiencing conflicts do not neglect the role of their youth in building peace. When young people are able to participate in social and political life, they have the ability to facilitate the peaceful transition toward the balanced and conflict-free society. The role that young people play can be greater in societies that are already free of conflict. The United Nations classified youth as the first factor in the societal movement aimed at change and transformation for the better. With this in mind, developing the youth by enhancing their skills and empowerment is the ultimate means to promoting the advancement of society. In this world, ravaged by changes despite brilliant technological progress, young people play a pivotal role in facing crises and addressing issues thanks to their creative thinking and their boundless energy. They are the hope of society in the present and for the bright tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hamad, for the excellent remarks. And now I'm excited to introduce our amazing youth ambassador, Mrs. Dana Al-Anizzi. Mrs. Dana Al-Anizzi is a Qatari youth ambassador and the founder of the U17 Society, a platform that serves in training and membership of Qatari youth in SDGs. She graduated with a PSFS degree from the School of Foreign Services in Georgetown University, Qatar. She has been an active voice for youth in the MENA region on United Nations local platform. Dana, the mic is yours right now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you.
Thank you so much, Iman, for that kind introduction. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Your Excellencies, esteemed faculty, and inspiring youth. Tarahum, ta'awun, ta'aruf. To seek unity, to seek collaboration, and to seek knowledge. Those have been our guiding principles through the past year as we navigated the global COVID-19 pandemic, and they are what bind us today for the Ahad Pledge. In his address during the launch of the 2021 Global Humanitarian Appeal, the UN Secretary General stated, "This year, 2020, has been a year like no other. Conflict, climate change, and COVID-19 have created the greatest humanitarian challenge since the Second World War. The number of people at risk of starvation has doubled. Hundreds of millions of children are out of school, and levels of extreme poverty have risen for the first time in 22 years. Furthermore, according to a UN policy brief titled Education During COVID-19 and Beyond, the COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of education system in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners. The pandemic has also taken a grave mental toll on us all and forced us into isolation and deep reflection as we slipped in and out of quarantines and social distancing. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs, were adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. COVID-19 has disrupted and paralyzed this process. It did not only affect our physical health, it also struck us socially, psychologically, and economically. It showed us the fragility of our egos and systems and the importance of unity beyond our self-interests. Tarahum. It puts forward the sentiments of mercy, love, and solidarity. It proposes a new way forward, together, interdependently. The German idealist philosopher Johann Fichte proposed this reality in his publication, The Vocation of Man, in the 1800s. You could not remove a single grain of sand from its place without thereby changing something throughout all parts of the immeasurable whole. We are a small grain of sand in the grander scheme of the cosmos. What affects one of us affects our systems and inevitably alters our collective path at large. So, how can the SDGs guide us to building back better together, one grain of sand at a time? The SDGs call for partnerships through its 17th goal, Ta'awun. In an address to a high-level panel, Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed asserted that we need to rebuild our economies sustainably and inclusively. Remember, she said, we are in this together. No one will ever be truly safe until everyone is safe. In order to move forward, we must remember that each one of us truly counts and our fates are truly intertwined. When I asked you on social media what the pandemic has taught you about our community, your responses were overwhelming. Shared, we are all simple people. We all need to love and be loved by others. Hugo Osario said, despite the difficulty, we must persevere. In times of distress, great things are born. Fatma Al-Hajri shared, I realized that we are all interdependent and we need each other to get through situations like COVID. Youth are a positive and essential force for development when provided with the knowledge and opportunities we need to thrive. As we build back better, we should strive towards more equitable, inclusive, and sustainable communities. Let us not fall back to our old structures with embedded inequities of race, ethnicity, gender, and so on and so forth. You do have the power to speak up against that and change it. The key is this, ta'aruf. Through this platform, you have the opportunity to listen to one another, build on one another's passions for social justice, and unite to manifest the change you believe in. I'm also very honored to be a part of this pledge with you for the upcoming year and beyond, as part of the core committee offering guidance and support. With 9 years left, before we review our call to action for the SDGs in 2030, AHD asks you to make a promise to your community. But today, I ask you to make a promise to yourself. Promise to continue seeking knowledge. Promise to be compassionate and empathetic. Promise to listen to one another and hold space for communal support. But above all, Promise to love yourself. For without love for yourself, you cannot become a source of love, service, and inspiration to your communities. I wish you a blessed and fruitful conference ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. And now please allow me to introduce Mrs. Ihsan bin Alloush. Ihsan bin Alloush is a Moroccan social media influencer, journalist, and travel vlogger on YouTube. She was officially appointed as the Goodwill Ambassador of the European Union in Morocco. And please, for non-speakers of English language, join us in the chat because Fatin bin Alloush will transfer it.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me? Everything is great. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Okay, great. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Well, I might be doing both, like speaking in English and Arabic at the same time, because I know that, you know, like there's a lot of people, there's a lot of you that they can speak Arabic more than English. So that's why I think it's really important to do both, so we can like translate the message or send the message to everyone around the Arabic countries and around the world. Why not? So, Salam alaikum, this is Ihsan bin Alloush. Salam alaikum, معكم إحسان بن علوش. سأتحدث بالإنجليزية وبالعربية كذلك في نفس الوقت. سأقدم نفسي في البداية. معكم إحسان بن علوش، صحفية وصانعة محتوى عبر وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي. سنتحدث اليوم حول الأعمال التطوعية. لماذا مهمة الأعمال التطوعية بالنسبة للشباب؟ وكيف بإمكانها أن تفيدنا في المستقبل. So I'll be speaking about why it is important for us as youth to do like some humanitarian volunteering work. So this is my speech gonna be like that. And please, I want you guys to interact with me. I want to see your comments. I want to hear your voice as well, because I'm going to share with you now like some let me say, not steps, but I might call them like some tips that helped me to learn more from the volunteering work. سأشارككم الآن بعض الأشياء التي تعلمتها من الأعمال التطوعية. شكرا. من الأعمال التطوعية. وللإشارة، أنا حالياً مشاركة في عمل تطوعي في أحد المناطق هنا في جنوب المغرب. سعيدة جداً بهذه المشاركة. لم أكن أظن أنها ستكون في نفس الوقت، لكن الحمد لله كل شيء بخير لحد الآن. So I just want to translate this part. By the way, I'm a part of a humanitarian project right now. It's in the south of Morocco. So I didn't know that it might be like with the AHD event, but alhamdulillah, everything now is great. I can do both. I'm volunteering at the same time. I might be like, I can do like my speech. So now let me talk in Arabic first. لماذا الأعمال التطوعية؟ في البداية أود منكم شباب أن أسألكم كم من شخص شارك في الأعمال التطوعية؟ أود إجاباتكم الآن. لو بإمكانكم أن تشاركوني إياها في التعليقات. معنا فاتن تقول أنا، قمر، هيا، ما شاء الله ما شاء الله. I didn't expect that. So how many people already like did this volunteering work? So let me specify. Okay, Ibrahim, me, Sarah. Okay, Jihad, Laura, Fatim, Khadija, mashallah, there's so many people. We have already did this volunteering work. How many people have never been a part of humanitarian volunteering work? you know, because it's not the same thing. Let's see, we have here أحلام. تقول أحلام أنها لم تشارك بعد لكنها ستحاول. أحلام said that I didn't have the opportunity yet, but this year I'm managing to try. That's amazing, أحلام. I'm still doing it. That's great. Dana, I've been trying so many times. So Dana, like, were you a part of it or you've never tried it? Haya, I've never been yet. Haya, you should try. Humanitarian, yes. Fahid, not yet. Okay. فمجموعة من الشباب كما هو ملاحظ الآن في التعليقات، هنا الشباب المشاركين في هذا المؤتمر، مجموعة من الشباب شاركوا في أعمال تطوعية عدة، لكن كذلك مجموعة من الشباب آخرين لم يشاركوا، لم تتح لهم الفرصة في المشاركة في الأعمال التطوعية. إذن الآن سأقنعكم بالمشاركة في الأعمال التطوعية، أو سأشارككم تجربتي الخاصة ماذا علمتني الأعمال التطوعية. وبحكم أني في عين المكان والآن يعني مستعدة جدا للعمل التطوعي حاليا، يعني اليوم شاركت من قبل، تقول جهاد شاركت من قبل وما زلت أبحث عن فرص أكثر. حقا إنها متعة جدا. دعوني أشارككم ماذا تعلمت من الأعمال التطوعية، وأود كذلك من أحد المشاركين لو يستطيعون مساعدتي في ترجمة حتى لا أنسى أي تفصيلة بالإنجليزية. So like I'll be speaking Arabic first, sharing with you my experience in volunteering work, and at the same time there might be some translation on the chat section. Okay, so thank you, Fatin. Thank you. So Fatin, she's going to help us with the translation. حسناً، ماذا تعلمنا كي لا نضيع الكثير من الوقت؟ في البداية يجب أن تعلموا أن الأعمال التطوعية الإنسانية تكسبكم الأجر من الله عز وجل. بداية الأمر هناك أجر، هناك سعادة غامرة، سعادة لن تحسوها في أي مكان آخر أينما كنتم، سعادة من القلب. والسعادة الأساسية هي أن تكون سبب في إسعاد شخص آخر. السعادة الأساسية أنك ستكون سبب في أن ترسم ابتسامة على وجه شخص آخر. هذه البداية. كذلك الأعمال التطوعية تجعلكم تعتمدون على أنفسكم، تجعلكم تفكرون في الغير، تجعلكم تفكرون في المسؤولية، يصبح لديكم إحساس بالمسؤولية، الإحساس بالآخرين، كذلك الإحساس أنكم مهمين في بناء المجتمعات، في بناء بلدانكم. لا يمكن أن يكون العبء على مثلا أشخاص معينين في أي بلد، لا، يجب أن نساعد جميعا بما استطعنا، وخصوصا نحن الشباب لهم قدرة هائلة في أن يساعدوا، في أن يتطوعوا، في أن يتعلموا. تعلمون أن الأعمال التطوعية صدقاً قد تجعلكم تتعلمون أكثر من 10 مرات، دائماً أكرر هذه الكلمة، أكثر من 10 مرات مما تتعلمونه ربما في المدارس، لأن تكون تجارب حقيقية، توسيع معارف، تعلم خبرات. كذلك لكل من يعاني من الضعف الشخصية، من الخجل أمام الناس. أنا كنت من الأشخاص الذين كانوا خجولين جدا، لم أكن أستطيع أن أتحدث أمام الأشخاص الآخرين، لكن الأعمال التطوعية ساعدتني جدا، وكذلك وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي ساعدتني جدا في أن أتخلص من هذا الأمر، وأن أصبح أكثر تفاعلية، أكثر يعني أكثر فعالية، لأن أغير من نفسي من الداخل، وأن أغير أو أساهم في تغيير المجتمع للأفضل. شباب، أنتم بناء المجتمعات، أنتم من بيدكم أن نغير مجتمعاتنا للأفضل. بلداننا والإنسانية هي مسؤوليتنا جميعا. يجب أن نفكر في الموضوع بجدية أكبر. التطوع ليس فقط الذهاب للمناطق وأخذ الصور لا، التطوع أكبر بكثير من هذه المواضيع. التطوع هو أنك تقوم بأعمال بدون أجر يعني مادي، لكن أجرك عند رب العالمين يكون أعلى مما تتوقع، ويكون كذلك كما أخبرتكم تتعلمون مجموعة من الأمور انطلاقا من تجارب الأشخاص الذين ستلتقون بهم في الأماكن التطوعية. مثلا جربت أنا التطوع في النيجر، كانت لدي تجربة رائعة في النيجر، تجربة رائعة في الحدود التركية السورية، تجربة رائعة في بلدي هنا المغرب. الإحساس الإنساني لن تجده في أي مكان، ستجده في الأماكن المليئة بالبساطة، المليئة بالكرم وأشياء ربما لن تجدها في أماكن أخرى، أو ستجدها لكن لن تجدها بهذه الأضعاف في هذه الأماكن. كذلك أتمنى من كل شخص أن يعي بأن يجب أن نشجع الشباب جميعا وكل المواطنين مثلا وكل لنقل كل البشر من كل أنحاء العالم أن يشجعوا على السياحة التضامنية. السياحة التضامنية ما معناها؟ أن تذهب لمكان فيها أشخاص مثلا تقوم أنت بأعمال تطوع، وفي نفس الوقت هؤلاء الأشخاص الذين ستساعدهم في مجموعة من الأمور هم سيساعدونك، سيستقبلونك، ستقوم بجولات سياحية رائعة في أماكن رائعة جدا. التطوع مدرسة، التطوع من أجمل الأشياء التي يمكن أن يجربها المرء. لذلك ربما هذه انطلاقاً من تجربتي الشخصية، لكن أنا متأكدة 100% من كل الأشخاص الذين يشاركونني الآن تعلموا الكثير من الأمور في بلدانهم، تعلموا الكثير من الأمور انطلاقاً من هذه الأعمال التطوعية. ليس فقط الشباب من عليهم أن يقوموا بالأعمال التطوعية، حتى من هم أكبر سناً وحتى من هم أصغر سناً. فبإذن الله بفضل الأعمال التطوعية بإمكاننا أن نغير الكثير للأفضل وليس للأسوأ. أود منكم في النهاية، لا أعلم كم تبقى لي من الوقت، إذا بإمكانكم أن تقولوا لي كم، إيمان أو إيفرين. أود منكم أن تشاركوني هنا في التعليقات ماذا تعلمتم من التطوع في كلمة واحدة، فحتى نتعلم من بعضنا البعض. وأود أن يكون هنالك تحدي. نحن ماذا قلنا؟ قلنا بأن في هذا المؤتمر نتعلم مثلا نبحث عن التعارف، التعاون، التراحم. التطوع يساوي كل هذه الأمور مجموعة. فلذلك أود منكم أن تشاركوني ماذا تعلمتم من التطوع في كلمة واحدة. لدينا هنا الإحساس بالغير، صحيح. الإنسانية، جيد جدا. نورة ورضا. جهاد تقول الإحساس بالغير، نعم. سارة تقول الرحمة، جيد. مونيا تقول التعاون، طبعا. الامتنان، جميل. الرحمة، kindness، طبعا. solidarity of course، teamwork of course، نعم. العمل الجماعي القيام بأشياء مع مختلف مثلا الأشخاص من مختلف المناطق يوسع من قاعدة معرفتكم المجموعة من الأمور لم تكونوا تدرونها من قبل. الرفق، حب الغير، caring of course، empathy، relationships of course Fatim, yes, right, collaboration. So this is like what people are they're just like now describing volunteering in one word. So that's the thing. Mercy of course. الرضا، جميل. loving، العلاقات، power and unity. الرحمة، جميل. رائعين شباب. happiness، العطاء، جميل جدا، جميل. إذن الآن كل من لم يجرب التطوع بعد، هل بإمكانكم أن نقوم مثلا بتعهد أمام الجميع أننا سنقوم بأعمال تطوعية أكثر وأن نأخذ هذا الموضوع بجدية أكبر؟ سأنتظر أجوبتكم. فاطمة تقول of course. yes. قمر yes. فاطمة so now yes. نعم سحر، جميل جدا. of course. خلينا نوضعوها كذلك في التعهد الذي ستقومون به، صحيح؟ اذكروا مسألة التطوع. بالطبع، جميل. عبد الرحمن يقول الكثير منا مستعد للتطوع، منتظرين فقط الفرصة. عبد الرحمن، دعني فقط باختصار أقول لك لا يجب أن ننتظر نحن الفرصة، يجب أن نبحث نحن عن الفرصة التطوعية، أن تبحث عن منظمات، عن جمعيات في بلدك، يعني أن تقوم أنت بهذا الواجب، البحث، وأن تبرز اهتمامك بالتطوع وتصنع هذه الفرصة، وستجد التطوع وستجد هذه التجارب. أشكركم جزيل الشكر على كل اقتراحاتكم. سأنتظر أفكاركم في هذا المؤتمر، في نهاية هذا المؤتمر بإذن الله. نعم. Do I still have some times or إيمان؟
Go for it إسان please تفضلي يعني it's all good.
جميل. لأني أود أن أشارك تجارب الشباب. جميل. هنا جهات تقول أقترح أن يكون بعد نهاية هذا الحدث أن نساعد بعضنا جميعاً في خلق مشروع يساعد بشكل عام في الاستفادة من خبرات الشباب المشاركة هنا. اقتراح رائع جهاد. كذلك great talk. I would like to share youth experiences. جميل. إذن ربما wait for an opportunity created. Yes, right, right. That's great idea. إذن شباب، هل لديكم اقتراحات أخرى كيف بإمكاننا أن ندمج التطوع في البليدج الذي ستنجزونه؟ هل لديكم اقتراحات عن هذا الموضوع؟ I agree. مريم تتفق، نور تتفق مع الفكرة الأولى التي اقترحتها جهاد. لدينا هنا مجيب يتفق كذلك. Every summer for 3 years. The women teach kids women English and French. قمر تقول بأنها درست الترجمة وهي الآن تقوم يعني كراء ربما غرف للتعليم الأطفال وتعليم النساء الإنجليزية والفرنسية. جميل جداً قمر، عمل رائع. هل بإمكانكم أن تشاركونا في بضع ثواني ما الأعمال التطوعية التي قمتم بها من قبل؟ وعندما أقول تطوعية أتكلم أكثر عن الأعمال الإنسانية فيها حس إنساني. Give a platform. Maybe. Okay. هذا اقتراح دانا كفوت. تقول أنه يجب علينا أن نعطي مثلا منصة ربما توعي الناس من كل الأمور التي لها علاقة بالإجرام إلى آخره. Maybe like what everyone suggested by volunteering. ونشجعهم كذلك على الأعمال التطوعية ويكون هنالك تدريب. جميل جدا دانا، فكرة رائعة. Unfortunately in our country we don't have organization for that. أحلام, where do you come from? Because there's a lot of organizations everywhere, of course. Okay. أود أن يكون في التطوع من أجل الحيوانات، مساهمتهم، مساعدتهم. طبعاً الحيوانات جزء من المنظومة البيئية، جزء منا جميعاً. يجب كذلك المساعدة من هذا الجانب. جمعية لتعليم أطفال الشوارع، رائعة خديجة. هذه مشاركاتكم في الأعمال التطوعية. We can start by donation blood. It's easy and very important. Yes, Sahar, thank you for sharing. I had actually a campaign. I was a part of it. It was about like encouraging people to do donation blood. It was amazing. We had a lot of volunteers. Alhamdulillah. That's so great. So كنت أقول أنه كنت شاركت كذلك في حملة إنسانية، حملة للمساعدة أشخاص في التبرع أو لتشجيع الشباب في التبرع بالدم. ولله الحمد كانت الحملة رائعة جدا وأتانا الكثير من الشباب الذين تطوعوا. ربما لم يكونوا يملكون المعلومة، معلومة أهمية التطوع أو التبرع بالدم إلى آخره. لذلك يجب أن نشارك أكبر عدد من الشباب. لماذا مهم التطوع؟ لماذا مهم التبرع بالدم؟ بعدها نشاركهم يعني فرص إن شاء الله. أنا كمعلمة أتطوع بمعرفتي ووقتي لطلابي. جيد جدا سارة، شكرا لك. جمعية لكسوة المحتاجين، جميل. So I have a lot of wow. كلامكم رائع. لم أرى كل هذه الرسائل. التطوع في المجال التعليمي، خاصة تعليم الأطفال، ساعدت اللاجئين من سوريا. إذا كنت في تركيا، لورا تقول هذا giving people small gift bags for Eid Day with Qatar Charity and giving people in need food. Amazing العنود. You're doing amazing job. نعم، شاركت في التطوع لمساعدة إخواننا في السودان، لبنان، بحملة سالمة يا السودان، وأيضا معك يا بيروت. برافو إيمان، برافو. أنا فخورة بكم جميعاً. أنتم يعني قادة الشباب. ما شاء الله عليكم جميعاً. أتمنى أن يقوم شخص ما من الفريق، إيمان مثلاً أو إيفرين، بتسجيل أو بالاحتفاظ بكل هذه الاقتراحات التي شاركها الشباب أو تجاربهم، حتى أشاركها عبر وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي الخاصة بي. شكراً لكم جزيل الشكر. كنت سعيدة بهذا المؤتمر، سعيدة بالتعرف عليكم وفخورة بكم جميعاً. شكراً لكم. Thank you Iman. Thank you everyone. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Ahsan. And now please allow me to introduce Dr. Jeremy Coles. Dr. Jeremy Coles is one of Associate Professor of Philosophy at Georgetown University, School of Foreign Services in Qatar. The mic is yours, Dr.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hopefully be able to share my screen here, so you don't have to just stare at me the whole time. Let's see here. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. I'll just assume that you can. So I would like to thank everyone. Thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. Al-Kuwadi, Dr. Shaheen, Dr. Tok, all the facilitators and participants for inviting me to participate in this event. The subject of my talk today, I was asked to talk about justice in a post-COVID world and what that is supposed to look like, and what the challenges are to achieving justice in a post-COVID world. So we'll start up talking about bad things. Just last month in the Indian state of Uttarakhand, part of a glacier collapsed into a river, sending waters downstream, burst open the dam, killed dozens and caused extensive damage. Well, what caused this glacier to collapse? Increased temperatures and melting caused by climate change. Climate change is probably the great global crisis of our time, but it's also the most difficult to solve for the simple reason that the burning of fossil fuels has been the engine that has driven the spectacular growth of the leading world economies over the past 200 years. So consider the following thing. In 1820, 3/4 of the world's population lived on less than $1 a day, in adjusted dollars, of course. Today, very few people do, and in the West, almost nobody does. Now, one of the problems, one feature of injustice is that it often involves the powerful exploiting the less powerful or abusing the less powerful. If you look at who has benefited from carbon emissions and who's going to suffer the most, I think we see a clear case of very significant injustice. Over half of all greenhouse gases produced since the Industrial Revolution were produced by the United States and the countries of the European Union, including the United Kingdom. So as I said, these countries have experienced fantastic growth, fueled largely by the consumption of fossil fuels. But this growth has come at great cost, damage to the environment and runaway warming. However, not everyone is going to bear this cost equally. And ironically, the people who will be hit the hardest by climate change are often the people who actually have benefited from, the least from centuries of global carbon emissions. So consider, for example, the country of Bangladesh. Much of Bangladesh is only a meter or two above sea level, and almost 20% of the country is expected to be underwater by 2050, a result of rising seas. Already, much of the previously fertile Farmland of Bangladesh has been poisoned by salt, a result of higher tides and encroachment by seawater. Bangladesh is not a wealthy country. It has not benefited financially from the spectacular growth of Western economies over the last 200 years, and yet it is paying the price for all of this growth. Now, this seems like an obvious injustice. Wealthy countries benefit from the excessive carbon emissions, and poor countries pay an outsized price. Now, injustice, one of the characteristics of injustice is that it often involves abuse of the less powerful by the more powerful. Powerful nations take advantage of their strength to set up an international system that unfairly burdens poor countries. Majority populations in democracies set up rules that discriminate against minorities and often subject them to terrible oppression. This is something that the French political theorist Alexis de Tocqueville calls tyranny of the majority. So when we look at this particular aspect of injustice, it can make you feel despair precisely because of the inequality of power that's involved. How can you fight injustice that's rooted in the fact that one group is just more powerful than the other? How can this powerful group be persuaded to give up the advantages that they have? Well, the simple and unilluminating so far answer is that fighting injustice requires cooperation. Often, the powerful are very few in number, and the weak are many in number. And in such cases, the weak can be powerful if they act together as a group. We've seen this happen again and again throughout history, such as, for example, when the people of a nation unite to get rid of a powerful but tyrannical government. So, for example, the Iranian Revolution of 1977 to 79, where the people rose up against the Shah, whose rule they perceived as unjust and tyrannical. Individually, the people were weak. But together, they were a force that the Iranian government could not contain. They refused to go to work. They marched in the streets. The government simply could not arrest all of them or force all of them to obey. So in the book's Why Civil Resistance Works, which reports on this and other instances of nonviolent revolution, it's reported that transcripts of a security meeting held in 1979 reports that the Iran planned to arrest 100,000 opposition activists, but they didn't actually have space in the jails to put to jail them. They only had 5,000 jail spaces, so they had to release a bunch of people just to make room for the people they're arresting. The government had enough power to make some people comply, but no government has enough people to make all citizens obey if they decide together that they just don't want to. So the Shah said in an October 1978 interview, he said, "You cannot crack down on one place and make people on the next block behave." Eventually, the government just had to give up controlling the people. The Shah fled the country to the United States, and the revolution succeeded. But even when the weak are in a minority, even when the strong are many and the weak are few, the weak can still affect change, again, as long as they cooperate and act in a coordinated manner. So an example of this is the highly organized and coordinated protests of Black Americans during the US Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 60s. So during this time in the United States, there were many places where racist so-called Jim Crow laws significantly restricted the rights of Black Americans. They could not eat in certain restaurants. They could not sit with whites in movie theaters. They were not allowed to go to school with white children, and so on and so on. So Black Americans, led by experienced organizers, undertook a series of nonviolent protests, including sit-ins, marches, and other activities designed to make the nation confront its racism. In doing so, they won over many members of the white majority. Obviously, this did not end racism in the United States, but it did result in the passage of many important laws, such as the Civil Rights Act, and it led to the abolishment of these Jim Crow laws. So, fighting injustice, whether the weak are many or the weak are few, they have to cooperate if they're going to overthrow the unjust tyranny of the strong. But for them to cooperate, they have to share information. Separated, the weak are just that. They're weak. It's only united that they pose a threat to the strong. It's only united that they pose a threat to the established order. Whether the weak are many or few, for them to succeed in resisting the tyranny of the strong, they have to cooperate. Coordination is required. And this requires sharing of information regarding where protests will happen, what kind of protests will happen, who can help you if you get into trouble, and so on. Now, in earlier times, before we had social media, sharing of information was a more complicated affair. So during the US Civil Rights Movement, Black churches, as well as Black colleges and universities, allowed for movement organization. They allowed for sharing of information. During the Iranian Revolution, the Mosque Network famously distributed information. Iran's decentralized mosque network provided an effective communication channel. Ayatollah Khomeini used this network to distribute audio cassette tapes with speeches and instructions to revolutionaries. One official with the Ministry of National Guidance said at the time, he said that tape cassettes were stronger than fighter planes because they spread information, they coordinated those who were opposed to the Shah's regime. So, fighting injustice requires cooperation. Cooperation requires information. And so it turns out then that one of the great threats to cooperation is going to be disinformation. And so given the importance of shared information for cooperation and collective action, it's not surprising that powerful organizations will often try to spread disinformation in order to keep people from cooperating, in order to keep people from organizing. Now, the goal might not be to get everyone to believe something false. The goal might simply be to confuse the issue long enough to prevent people from getting together to act cooperatively. So let me give you an example. Consider how big tobacco companies reacted, and this is a real ad telling you that your doctor wants you to smoke Camel cigarettes. Consider how big tobacco companies reacted to research demonstrating a causal relation between smoking and lung cancer. By the late 1950s, the relation was generally accepted by scientists and physicians. The World Health Organization, it writes in a report on the tobacco companies that, again, by the early 50s, there was evidence of a statistical link between smoking and lung cancer, and even the tobacco industry's own scientists were finding cancer-causing chemicals in smoke and began to confirm the relationship between smoking and cancer. Now, in the face of this evidence that their products were deadly, the tobacco industry responded by creating doubt and controversy surrounding the health risk. They lulled the public into a false sense of security. It wasn't, in fact, until 1997 that any major tobacco company, Liggett, admitted to a connection between smoking and cancer, but the others continued, even at that late date, to deny the connection. A representative from Hill and Knowlton, so the WHO report says that publicly the company's overriding policy was to argue that they're simply not qualified to comment on the health consequences of smoking, but then in fact they do go to comment on it, and they do so to create confusion and keep the controversy open. So a representative from Hill and Knowlton, which is a very well-known public relations firm, wrote back in 1968, the most important type of story is that which casts doubt on the cause and effect theory of disease and smoking. Eye-grabbing headlines were needed and should strongly call out the point: controversy, contradiction, other factors, unknowns. And again, the point is not necessarily to convince people that smoking is healthy. It's merely to prevent agreement from forming, because cooperation, collective action, like legislation against tobacco companies, that can only happen if there's consensus or agreement. Therefore, if you can keep people from agreeing, then you can keep people from cooperating. And it's often very much in the interest of powerful actors to keep people from cooperating with each other, at least when that cooperation is directed against the interests of those powerful actors. Now, we can see a similar dynamic with regards to global climate change. Despite the fact that nearly all actively publishing climate scientists believe that human activity is causing global climate change, large oil companies and their lobbying companies have pursued exactly the same strategy as the tobacco companies pursued for decades. And particularly in the United States, which ranks second in the world in greenhouse gas emissions, the strategy has been very successful. Legislators will refuse to pass climate change legislation, saying that it hasn't been proven that we don't know. Once again, the spread of disinformation prevents agreement, and in the absence of agreement, we cannot cooperate against the powerful actors who are responsible for spreading this disinformation. That, again, is often the point of such disinformation. It makes people weak and powerless. It prevents them from uniting and cooperating to attack the powerful. Well, if fighting injustice requires cooperation, and cooperation requires information, it turns out then that disinformation is going to be one of the greatest threats in our fight against injustice. We, right now, are living in a time of remarkable polarization. And when I use the word polarization, I mean serious disagreement about very basic issues. And it's a particular kind of polarization. People don't just disagree about politics because people have always done that. Instead, people just have radically different understandings about the world that we live in. People, they occupy different factual realities. And this is a threat to our ability to fight against great injustice. As we've seen, fighting injustice requires cooperation. But cooperation requires that we agree on the nature of the problem that we face. We can't cooperate if we're just living in different realities. Now, let me give you an example of the kind of polarization I'm talking about. So when I was writing this talk, the biggest annual convention of American political conservatives was taking place. This is CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. It was taking place in Florida with major members of the Republican Party, including Donald Trump, as speakers. Now, one major claim that kept getting repeated was that Trump actually won the election and that the Democrats stole the presidency. Speakers, including Trump himself, repeated this over and over and over again. As it turns out, fully 1/3 of all Americans believe that Trump actually won the election back in November. Somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of all Republicans believe this. They don't actually believe that Joe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States. They think he stole the election. And people are polarized around a large range of it. So people just they're not in the same factual reality. They don't agree on basic facts about the world. People are polarized around a large range of issues. So most Americans, including most Republicans, believe humans contribute to climate change, but among conservative Republicans, 45% believe humans contribute little or nothing to climate change. So as researchers have noted, political polarization is a trend that is accelerating in many countries around the globe, not just in the United States, but also in the UK, Poland, Hungary, and elsewhere. And again, this involves not merely people of different ideologies regarding each other with increased distrust and hostility. It often involves their living in a different factual reality. This prevents them from understanding each other or understanding how the other person's point of view could even seem reasonable in the first place. How does this happen? How do ordinary people come to inhabit a reality that is so different from everybody else's? Well, sometimes, of course, it's on purpose. It's by intentional design. So the US Republican Party has a clear motive in casting doubt on the legitimacy of the 2020 election. By doing so, it weakens Biden's presidency, and it justifies states that are controlled by Republican legislatures in passing restrictive voting laws, which almost always benefit Republicans, not Democrats. But it turns out that a lot of the time, the result that people come to occupy or inhabit different factual realities, sometimes it occurs not by anyone's intention. Sometimes it occurs purely as a side effect of some other process. So, for example, sometimes it's the side effect of social media and the ways in which social media algorithms work to deliver content to us. Social media algorithms are easy to understand in principle. Social media companies make money by selling ads. So they want to deliver content to you that you will watch, so that you will watch more, so that they will sell more ads. The purpose of algorithms is to figure out what you like and to deliver more of it to you. So, for example, if you watch a video of football highlights, the algorithm might put a video of Champions League highlights in your feed. If you watch that also, then you'll get more of the same. As I said, simple in principle. But the same is going to apply to political content. Suppose you watch a video from a conservative politician. The algorithm will put a similar video in your feed. If you watch that, then you'll get more of the same. Before long, the only political content you are seeing is conservative political content. And if you're an American, you might wind up like this guy. So you are in what the philosopher C.T. Nguyen calls an epistemic bubble, a space where the only voices you hear are ones that agree with you. The political scientist Eli Pariser calls this a filter bubble. The algorithms filter what you experience, and you end up living in a bubble where the only opinions you ever hear are, again, ones that you already agree with. Filter bubbles have certain features, according to Pariser, that makes them very dangerous. First, these filter bubbles are invisible. So Pariser writes, most viewers of conservative or liberal news sources know that they're going to a station curated to serve a particular political viewpoint. But most people in a filter bubble don't know that they are in one. Because you haven't chosen the criteria by which sites filter information in and out, it's easy to imagine that the information that comes through a filter bubble is unbiased, objective, true. Now, second, and this point is related to the first point, people in a filter bubble haven't chosen, as far as they know, to have only certain viewpoints presented to them. So Pariser says, you don't choose to enter the bubble. When you turn on Fox News or read The Nation, you're making a decision about what kind of filter to use to make sense of the world. You don't make the same kind of choice with personalized filters. They come to you, and because they drive up profits for the websites that use them, they'll become harder and harder to avoid. So people end up simply having their view of the world reinforced over and over and over again. Just as bad, they never encounter anything that contradicts their view of the world. And so for many people, it's hard to understand how anyone could disagree with them, because as far as they can tell, there's literally nothing speaking in favor of opposing points of view. And so they conclude that people who disagree with them must be crazy or simply evil and committed to doing evil things. Now, this breakdown in consensus, this fracturing or breaking of the basic factual reality in which we live is, I think, the greatest obstacle to pursuing justice in a post-COVID world. Justice requires cooperation, and cooperation requires agreement. Maybe not agreement about moral principles, because people with different moral principles can still come up with a basis for cooperation. That's the whole point behind today's multicultural societies. But people will have a lot of difficulty cooperating if they simply don't agree on the nature of the reality that they inhabit. When we agree on the nature of the threat that we face, we can do amazing things. Consider, for example, the eradication of smallpox. Smallpox it's hard to overestimate how terrible smallpox was. It was a horrible disease that for many centuries was one of the leading causes of human death. It was fatal in 30% or more of cases, and survivors were often left with terrible scarring and permanent disabilities. Smallpox killed 300 million people in the 20th century alone. So the World Health Organization began eradication efforts in 1959, and it began an intensified effort in 1967. With cooperation from countries all over the world, billions of vaccinations were given. The last naturally occurring case of smallpox was in 1977, and in 1980, the World Health Organization declared that smallpox had been eradicated from the earth. After centuries of causing untold death, untold misery, the world was finally free of this scourge thanks to cooperation. Now, arguably, the world is doing less well in its fight against COVID, with people much less willing to cooperate with measures to prevent spread and transmission. So here is a graph of all the different mutations of COVID-19 that have emerged since it first appeared on the scene a year and a half ago. Viruses mutate when they spread, and they spread when people don't take measures to stop them spreading, like social distancing, wearing masks. And again, a lot of the reason why people aren't taking these measures is because of disinformation. Disinformation about how dangerous it is, disinformation about masks, disinformation about vaccines. So disinformation is threatening our ability to fight this dangerous virus. Think, though, about the smallpox campaign that was so very successful. Examples like the smallpox one have a common feature. Everybody, or almost everybody, agreed on the problem, and everybody, or almost everybody, agreed on the solution. This underlying agreement allowed for cooperation, and so the problem was solved, the danger averted. The danger now is not that injustice exists, because injustice has always existed. The danger is that the basis for fighting injustice, the basis of shared factual agreement, is itself in danger. The very thing which is required for us to challenge injustice is threatened with destruction, which would make it impossible to fight against injustice. That is the real danger. As I said, there is terrible injustice in the world. Climate change is an example where wealthy countries have benefited disproportionately from greenhouse gas emissions, and many poor countries are set to be disproportionately harmed. So this is a clear case of injustice, but wealthy nations are not acting. Without overwhelming agreement as to what the problem is and what the solutions are, we cannot address this injustice. And this dynamic appears over and over and over again. So, for example, despite overwhelming evidence of structural racism in many countries, racial majority, so for example, in the United States, white Americans are much less likely than Black Americans to believe that racism is still a problem. Here's a graph where you can see the yellow buttons are how likely Black Americans are to think that racism is a problem in things like dealing with the police, hiring, pay and promotions, when seeking medical treatment. And the blue buttons are how likely whites are to think. Whites just don't think racism is much of a problem in most of these areas. You can't address a problem if you can't even agree that it exists. To give another example, men are systematically ignorant of the harassment and discrimination that women face in public and in the workplace. You can't address a problem if you don't even know about it. Pursuit of justice requires agreement about what is happening in the world. And increasingly, this agreement is more and more distant. Now, there have always been grave injustices in the world, and I think there always will be. But presently, I fear that the greatest threat to justice in the world is not any particular regime, it's not any particular movement or political party. Rather, the greatest threat is a sort of threat to the very possibility of organizing against injustice. Fighting against injustice requires cooperation, but cooperation requires some level of basic agreement about what the problems are that we're facing and what a solution to these problems would look like. The threat of disinformation is a threat against the possibility of agreement, the kind of agreement that allows for cooperation, the kind of cooperation that is required if we are going to challenge injustice and the corrupt use of power. This is actually a much harder problem to face than any ordinary injustice. And if we're going to design for post-COVID humanity, this is what we need to be designing around. I hope that the next generation of thinkers and designers can rise to meet this challenge, the challenge of disinformation, which is the challenge of injustice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jeremy. And now we will go to the working groups. But before that, we will have simple questions and answers from Dr. Evren Talk.
Thank you, Iman. Actually, special thanks to Professor Kunz. I just wanted to, maybe we didn't clearly integrated this section in the agenda. Apologies for that. But usually after really very enriching academic presentations, it is really very important and really vital to let the youth and the participants reflect and maybe pose one or two questions to our esteemed professor. So is there any volunteer, or is there any of us actually among the participants who would like to raise a question to Professor Kunz? And I think you can raise your hand, not physically, but virtually. And I can see two hands actually. One is actually there, Kamar Abu Hawash. There, Kamar, you can actually unmute yourself. And then afterwards, so we have three questions: Kamar, Sarah, and Mujib.
Hello all, how are you doing? Doctor, I really liked how you talked about cooperation and how it affects the revolution. I'm from Lebanon, and as you know, the revolution in Lebanon isn't going the right way or on the right path, although all of the factors that you talked about we are trying to achieve. So what is the main reason that you think that makes this revolution isn't successful? Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a really hard question, and I'm not sure I have a good answer to that, because you know, as you say, it seems like all the elements are in place. I mean, you have entrenched political powers, but then you have you have a citizenry that agrees on what the problems are. Everyone is disgruntled. Everyone is unhappy. But then maybe the problem is that people just don't agree on exactly what the solution should look like. Like what would a power sharing agreement look like? You know, what would a new government look like that was non-sectarian, for example? So you know, maybe the problem there is, and again, I don't by any means claim to be an expert on, you know, for example, the Lebanese political situation or government. But maybe again, the problem there is that people can agree on the problem, but they can't exactly agree on what a solution would look like. I mean, that could be part of the issue there.
Thank you, Professor. There's Sarah. You need to unmute yourself.
Yes, perfect. Hi everyone. Thank you, Dr. Koons, for an insightful presentation. My question was in regards to disinformation, and you've mentioned that it's a grave issue, and I just wanted to ask, in addition to education and sort of training individuals for a more evidence approach in terms of, kind of analyzing and using evidence-based data to base off their claims, of course, and their assumptions. How can we decrease disinformation and in order to increase cooperation?
Well, it seems like so, I mean, as I said, one of the main sources of disinformation seems to be social media. And it seems, so a lot of social media disinformation is on purpose. I mean, there are groups on social media whose sole purpose is actually to disseminate misinformation. But the reason they're so successful is because of these social media algorithms that the social media companies design purely for the purpose of driving up their own revenue and their own profits. And so, at some point, the social media companies themselves are going to have to take responsibility for their role in the increasing polarization of society. And if they can't take responsibility, they have to be made to take responsibility through regulation or something like that. And so far, nobody stepped up to the plate and made them do that. Although, I think that these companies are increasingly starting to recognize the role they're playing in like actually destabilizing societies. I speak often of the United States because that's the country whose political situation I'm more familiar with. We literally had an insurrection in the United States, and it was driven by conspiracy theories over the election, a lot of which was driven by social media disinformation. You're having countries that are driven to the brink of civil war by disinformation because people are being fed these conspiracy theories. I mean, it's becoming like an actual threat to the political order in some places. And if countries aren't willing to regulate this, they're going to pay the price. So I think it has to be, like I said, if social media companies aren't willing to self-regulate, then they have to be regulated.
Thank you, Professor. There's 2 more questions, but please, if you can keep the questions really short and precise. Okay, Mujib, I'm really wondering about your question.
Hello, sir. My name is Mujib, and my question was that in my country, Pakistan, there is this mentality that women, there's a little bit related to feminism, that women should stay at home, they should do household works. So basically in 2013 to 2014, honor killing in my country was rampant. So what are the small steps that can be taken to change this mentality that women do not have power, they cannot go to school, their just basic purpose of life is to stay at home and do what the men are telling them to do. So what are the small steps that can be taken to change this mentality?
So I would honestly, it's so hard to change the norms of a country, and a lot has been written about this. So there's a really good book. There's a really good book by a scholar by the name of Christine Bicchieri. I think I can actually remember how to. I think that's how you spell her last name, called Norm Change. And she talks about how, a lot of the problems with changing the norms in a society are that they're social norms, right? So you have lots of problems like first mover problems, like, you as a father might support your daughter, taking on a non-traditional role, but then you don't want to be the first one to do it because then your daughter will pay the price. But then, like, if a bunch of people do it at the same time, then the cost is less. Or there's also pluralistic ignorance. Like, you think that the person across the street has these patriarchal attitudes, and they think that you have patriarchal attitudes. So, but actually neither of you does. So you're actually caught in this web of like each of you just assuming something about the other one. And so exactly. And so in this, and so to engage in norm change, so concrete norm change has actually been accomplished by getting groups of people together and talking about the ways in which these norms are harmful, and need to be changed, but it usually happens on sort of a small scale. So one of the things that Piketty talks about is the way like the foot binding norm changed in China. They eradicated foot binding within the space of 1 generation. And one way they did this was, for example, they would get groups of people together and they would all together sign a contract, say, I will not bind my daughter's feet. And that way you get rid of first mover problems, you get rid of pluralistic ignorance. You have a community of people who are like, okay, we're doing this together and that makes it okay, right? And so you can't make it an individual thing. You can't put it up to an individual person that they have to be the brave one, right? Because it's too much to ask of people. It has to be this kind of communal thing. You have to organize groups. It has to be a coordinated thing. People have to be there to give each other moral courage and moral support. That's the only way to do it. Like I said, I really can't recommend Piketty's book enough. And there's been a lot of work on this area about how you change norms, how you change ideology. But like I said, it can never, ever, ever be an individual thing because ideologies aren't individual. They're social, they're society-wide.
Thank you so much there, Mujib. I believe you are studying in Qatar. I can see the next generation school, right? So we are proud of you. I feel you might be the youngest member in this group, but your question was so prominent, timely, and well articulated. Thank you. There, Sheha, you have the last question. Please, the floor is yours. And then afterwards, we will move to the next stage of today, which is the breakout rooms.
Hello,
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So I'll say my question really fast. So how can we convince people around us and the society that a certain problem do exist? Because I think that a lot of times when I tell people around me that problem that do exist, especially when it comes to human rights, they say like stuff like, no, it's not true, you are discrediting us. So yeah, how can we convince them?
It's hard actually, and this is something that you can. This is something that people have been working pretty hard on too, because one of the things that we've discovered is that a lot of times when you argue against people, it just makes them more convinced of the truth of their own position. It's a weird feature of human psychology, and so a lot of times that one of the things that is recommended is that instead of like trying to argue against the person, you try to see where they're coming from, and then try to uncover sort of the basic premises of their position, and try to go from there and say, and maybe you can uncover some of the things, like if they think, oh well, if they're trying to defend a particular patriarchal position or position that women aren't fit to do this, then try to get to the root of it and say, well, why would you think that? And by probing to the root of their belief for this, it might uncover weaknesses in their own position so that they themselves can come up with a reason why their position isn't the greatest one. Because again, it's actually a really unfortunate feature of human psychology that we don't generally respond that well to arguments. Like I said, it makes people dig in their heels. And so it takes a bit of finesse with people like that. You can't just go at them and expect them to change, because they won't. The blinders kind of come down. And like I said, that's a very unfortunate thing. And it takes patience in dealing with people who have a particular ideology. It's very difficult. It's very difficult and challenging. Humans would be much easier to deal with if they were rational, but alas.
Thank you so much, Professor Kuhn. This has been a great session, and each time you join Design Post-COVID Humanity, we are always mesmerized, and we are so grateful and thankful to your contributions.
Thank you very much.
Dear Master of Ceremony, Iman, the mic is back to you. And I would like to also indicate that there is going to be a short brief by our colleague, Belize, if I'm not wrong. She will talk about the process afterwards, and we will be going for a 10 minutes break. And I cannot hear Iman, but maybe in the meantime, Belize actually can take over and explain what will happen in the next 10 minutes, I mean, after the break. And we can get prepared for the next stage, which will be the breakout sessions, and groups will be working in subgroups. Belize, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm right here. Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Evren. So let's start, guys. Let me share my screen first.